Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Using Mindfulness in Practice webinar. I'm Barbara Rudd, your host from Lambert's today, and I'm joined by mindfulness teacher and speaker Katie Sheen. Hi, Katie.
Hi, nice to see you.
And Katie's been part of the Lambert's educational team for many years now, so I'm sure lots of you with us today will know Katie already. Some of you will have joined us for our Mindfulness for Anxiety webinar back in the spring. Katie's been practicing mindfulness for 20 years, and she teaches mindfulness in a range of educational, charitable and corporate settings. She's an accredited breathworks teacher and has a special interest in both mindfulness for anxiety and mindfulness for pain management. And I know Katie's Udemy mindfulness course has been watched in over 100 countries across the globe. So we're so fortunate to have Katie teaching us today. Just before we get going though, a quick reminder, we have put you all on mute purely to reduce the background noise and enable everyone to hear this webinar, all right? Do feel free to ask a question via the chat facility and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. Alternatively, unmute and ask a question during the discussion time that we'll be having straight after this next hour. Don't forget, we will be sending you a full copy of the slide deck along with the references and a recording of today's hour-long webinar, so you can watch that at your own convenience. We'd appreciate your feedback by completing our survey, and this then initiates your certificate of completion being sent for attending this webinar. I think that's everything currently from this end, Katie, so I'll hand over to your good self. Thanks.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks very much, Barbara, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining me. It's I would say it's great to see you, but I can't see you right now. But during the question and answer section at the end, we'll be able to see each other, which will be lovely. So let's begin. So today is all about using mindfulness in your existing clinical practice. And so today is going to be looking at when we've got the evidence where we can confidently use mindfulness with our clients, some definitions, and we're going to be looking particularly at trauma sensitive mindfulness so that you can be confident that the way that you're introducing mindfulness is going to be appropriate for your clients, because a lot of the time, especially with all that we've been through during COVID, most people have unfortunately experienced some level of trauma. So we need to make sure that the mindfulness that we're introducing is sensitive to their needs. Part of that is to talk about the window of tolerance. And I'll show you where you can download images of that to share with your clients. But throughout, hopefully, there'll be resources and practical ideas that you're going to be confident to take into your practice for your own learning, of course, because mindfulness is definitely something to experience ourselves and then share with our clients from our own experience, rather than sharing a kind of an academic understanding of it. Which is partly why we've allowed such a long time for Q&A at the end. So the Q&A is from 1 till 1:30, if you'd like to say online. Then you'll have an opportunity to ask whatever you'd like. But during the presentation, if you'd like to type any questions that you have into the chat, Barbara will be monitoring that, and those are some of the questions that we'll answer at the end as well. So let's start with the evidence base as to when we can be really confident that mindfulness can be useful. So this comes from a couple of different sources, but the Zhang et al. Review is one of the most recent ones that was published in the British Medical Bulletin. So all of these conditions listed here have enough clinical evidence from clinical trials that you can be confident that they're going to be appropriate for people with these kind of conditions. But this is not an exclusive list, because the conclusion is that there are many other conditions that can be helped by mindfulness. We just need more studies in order to build up the evidence base. The evidence base is still relatively young. So this isn't, this is just where the evidence is strongest. When you want to be very careful or avoid using mindfulness, any kind of acute mental health issue, particularly any hint of suicidal thoughts or any other health problems of concern, things, psychotic episodes and so on, The reason that is advised is because if somebody is in the midst of an acute mental health issue, they're going to be very unstable. And whilst mindfulness can be very useful to bring them that stability, that would definitely be something that we do on a one-to-one basis, and you would definitely be specially trained to work with people in that situation. What we want is, because mindfulness is looking inwards, we want to make sure that people are first of all stable and secure. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you today is about how to help people to become more stable and secure, so that then they can go on and look at the deeper elements of mindfulness. The advice is to use with caution when there are seizure disorders and epilepsy. That's because with some kind of epilepsy, we need to be careful how we're affecting the brain waves and the kind of state of mind. But it can be really helpful. There's a lovely young girl with seizures that I'm working with at the moment. It's got multiple health conditions, some of which cause seizures. But I needed to know that for her example, for her, a loud noise, for example, can trigger her seizures. So I need to make sure that if I'm using the bell at the beginning or the end of a practice, that it's done in a very quiet way, or that when I use the guidance within the meditations, I'm not just coming in with a strong voice without any kind of warning. There's a kind of subtle way that you bring your voice in so that there's no startling effect. So that's an example of where you need to be very cautious, but it can be very helpful. And the same with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a whole strand of mindfulness called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. And if the mindfulness practitioner is trained in trauma sensitive mindfulness, they might even be specialising in supporting people with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's some very good evidence to show that people with PTSD can be helped by mindfulness. But the caution is because you wouldn't, for example, take them straight to their breath in case they had a history of panic attacks. So you would use other ways of helping them feel safer and secure. And I'm going to touch on some of those as we go through today. If you're looking to refer people to a mindfulness practitioner, then BAMBA is the association to look at. And on their website as well, it will explain to you a little bit more about when mindfulness is recommended and when there's a note of caution. So looking now at cost effectiveness. Now there might be fibromyalgia might be something that you see in your clinics a lot as lower back pain, and some of you may specialise in cancer support. So in terms of cost effectiveness, evidence shows that mindfulness can be useful in these kind of conditions, but again, it's probably cost effective in others, but there aren't the studies there yet for us to be able to claim that in our clinical practice. Excuse me. It's found to be beneficial in a wide range of settings. So in different healthcare settings, meaning there are a lot of trials that have been done in specific patient groups within hospital settings, for example. Schools, a huge amount of evidence, and universities actually, and then a variety of workplaces. So if there's somebody coming into your clinic who fits into one of these kind of categories, then by all means, you can use that as search terms on PubMed and other academic databases, and it may give you some idea as to the type of mindfulness or the type of evidence that is there for your particular client. In terms of online, MBIs means mindfulness-based interventions. The ones that are delivered purely online, obviously, primarily we've been offering these since COVID. I think like most other mindfulness teachers, I just took all my live courses and events and just put them online. So obviously, because this is relatively new, the evidence base is still building for that, but preliminary benefits are seen, and there's been an awful lot of studies run on mindfulness throughout the COVID pandemic that you might find interesting. Now, with the clients that you're considering talking to about mindfulness, maybe there are some markers that you could use in order to motivate them and to monitor whether or not mindfulness is being useful for them. So you could look at things like systolic blood pressure, cortisol, heart rate, pulse rate, and any of these other markers that might be being monitored by their medical team or by yourself in your clinic. But know that the evidence is there, is that meditation practice leads to improvements in a wide range of physiological markers of stress and in a wide range of populations. But let's look a little bit in a bit more detail about the difference between focused attention and open monitoring. There's a really useful paper. Slide will move on. There we go. That you might like to read. So I've taken a few quotes from here, but just want to explain them in a bit more detail. So if what we're doing is using a focused attention meditation, the clue is in the title, is that we've chosen something on which to focus. So this might be the sensation of the breath in the body. It might be an image. So for example, quite often used in Zen-based mindfulness would be something like solid like a mountain. And I'd really be helping people to hold that image of a mountain in their mind. You can see I immediately change how I sit, because I'm now sitting like a mountain. I'm aware of where my body is connected to the chair, where my feet are on the floor, that sense of a strong base really connected to the earth, and of taking my awareness down into my body. So we might work with feeling solid like a mountain, for example. It might be a physical sensation like feet on the floor, bottom on the chair. It might be a visual object. Some people prefer to keep their eyes open, and it could be that you're actually looking at something. Sound is a really useful one for a lot of people. It's a good way of coming into the present moment and just really noticing everything that you can hear. Sometimes it might be almost silent, and just practicing resting in allowing the sounds to come in and out of your awareness, and particularly noticing whether you're drawn out towards the sounds, which might be contributing to a sense of being pulled around by life, a sense of dispersion. And therefore we can work in practices with people where we're helping them to feel stable and safe where they are, and have a sense of the sound coming towards them. And then obviously once you practice with sounds, you can take that out into life. So whenever you're starting to feel dispersed, pulled out into life, okay, so coming back to breath and body, and again changing that sensation, that perception, so that life feels to come to you. You can also use an image of being a rock in the centre of a fast moving stream, so that life is moving around you and past you, so that you staying stable. That's very useful sometimes in clinic, where if you find that with the degree of empathy that you're showing your clients, you end up exhausted at the end of the clinical day, then that kind of image of a mountain and maybe within a stream can be very useful for you, so that you're really listening and present, but you're aware that this is flowing past you while you're remaining strong and stable in your clinical practice. So there are lots of different things that we can use there for a focused attention meditation. In open monitoring meditation, it's more about cultivating awareness and acceptance of everything that's happening in the present moment. So I might be aware of sound, but I might also have my eyes open and be aware of everything that I can see, whilst I'm also feeling the air against my skin, perhaps the way that I'm moving, if I'm walking or if I'm just moving around my house. And I'm also not just aware of physical sensations, and my perceptions and my thoughts are also within my awareness. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting, this is happening, this is how I'm feeling physically in my body, these are the kind of thoughts that are arising. So it's the difference between, say we have a problem in our life and we can feel as though we're very caught on it. So it's as though that's the thing that is completely taking up most of our attention and our awareness. But if I'm focused on something in a negative way, this can become very dominant. If I then become aware of that and open my awareness, it's as though I'm moving that problem back in to a better perspective. So my problem is the same, my thought is the same, but do you see how now, you can see everything around the room here, not just this one small ball that I'm holding up. And in fact, I was teaching a course last night, one of the Be Calm, Be Happy courses, and a lady says she's actually bought one of these and bought them for her friends, and it flashes and lights up. And when she's got a thought that she can't get rid of, she holds it against her head like this and think, right, I'm just going to put you into perspective. And she takes it away from her head, puts it on the other side of the room, and then looks at it and then opens her awareness to notice the whole room, the rest of what's going on, the rest of her life. And she said it's just really changed things. So you can use that kind of example with your clients as well, perhaps, the difference between focusing and open monitoring. Very useful if you're anxious and caught on something. Additional practices that help to facilitate awareness is to simply label things. So if you are trying to focus on one thing, or if you are trying to hold an open monitoring type of awareness, and then you find yourself getting caught on something, or if you're focused and you're getting pulled away, then you can just label it. So when you notice that your mind has wandered, you just say, oh, this is interesting. I'm thinking now, and now I'm planning, and now I'm worrying, and now I'm thinking about the past, and now I'm thinking about the future, and now I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for tea. Because mind wandering is natural. That is definitely going to happen to you if you, certainly if you try and meditate. And the reason that we try and notice it when we're meditating is so that we have an increased level of awareness of where that's happening just in everyday life. The number of times when we'll be pottering about doing something, but our mind is not present with us, it's not connected to our body, it's not noticing what we're doing. And quite often those thoughts can be feeding anxiety, for example. So the first stage of mindful awareness is just to notice what you are thinking or how you're feeling in your body, and particularly useful if you label things in your body. So not just, oh, I'm feeling anxious, but how does it feel in my body? Because maybe you're holding tension that then you can release. So the labeling is an important part of mindfulness, and that because that helps to increase our awareness. So all of this is around helping ourselves to not judge ourselves. Because if I just simply say, oh, I'm anxious now, that's not the same as saying, oh my goodness, I'm anxious about this. I can't believe I'm doing this again. And, you know, you have this whole kind of negative inner talk. So if you simply label it, it helps get that. You definitely don't want to disassociate yourself from the thinking, but you just want to see it more clearly. And by labeling it as well, you know, I noticed with, I have a tendency towards anxiety, that my anxiety is a lot around planning. And so that was helpful for me to think, okay, so if my brain is just getting caught up on planning, maybe there's something that I can do with writing out plans for things that will enable my brain to be more relaxed around that. So mindfulness is about awareness so that we can see things more clearly. So you get that clarity, that gives you the insight that you need in order to act differently. How long can you feel the benefits? This is often asked when you suggest to people they start mindfulness. How long will it take? We're all in such a hurry to get results. You can see benefits in just 8 weeks. So this is a famous review that looked at what actually happens to the brain. So within 8 weeks of practicing mindfulness, your brain will be different on a brain scan. So this is not just a case of willpower after a while, or of having to kind of force yourself to think differently. It's like anything that you practice. If you go to the gym for 8 weeks, after 8 weeks, you'll have more muscle strength than when you began. And the brain is just the same. But this study can be very motivational for people when you explain that, because I think a lot of people think that thinking and any kind of mindfulness is just quite fluffy. But to know that it's structurally changing your brain, and therefore your stress response will lessen because your brain is perceiving the world differently, can be very empowering. But the second thing that people will ask is, well, in 8 weeks, but how much do I need to do per day? So this is quite a recent study, and these were looking at people who'd never meditated before. And they found that 13 minutes seemed to be a bit of a sweet spot over 8 weeks. These are all the different kind of results that they got. So increased positivity, less anxiety, better attention, better memory and recognition. So they were doing tests where they were getting people to kind of remember words quickly, that kind of thing. But also about emotional regulation. So recognizing how they were feeling and being able to respond to that. So 13 minutes is kind of your minimum per day over the 8 weeks. However, and speaking as someone that teaches 8-week courses here all the time, I would definitely say the more that you engage with an 8-week mindfulness course, obviously the more the benefit that you will get. So this one was a 7-week course. And what they found was that the greatest improvements were amongst the people who'd done more home practice during the course and had continued to practice after the course had finished. So had really started to incorporate it into their life. So whereas that previous study was talking about 13 minutes, it's much more common in the literature to find that people who gained benefit within 8 weeks, and certainly that one about the brain scans, the one about changing the structure of your brain, you're looking at 20 to 40 minutes of mindfulness practice per day. But as I'm going to explain, mindfulness is not just about meditation. It's about bringing awareness to your thoughts and actions throughout the day. So on an 8-week course, we would not just be teaching people how to meditate. We'd be introducing key concepts and beliefs, ways of responding to the way that you think. And we'd also be talking about mindfulness in daily life. So we'd be talking about mindful walking, for example, mindful washing up, mindful showering, all sorts of ways that you can bring awareness to your life as it is. So more meditation is definitely more helpful. And this particular study was looking at telomeres. So this is just a hypothesis at the moment, but I know that in nutrition, we quite often look at telomeres, and I just wanted to pull this one out to show that people with meditation who practice meditation regularly seem to have longer telomeres than participants in comparison conditions. But the more that you practice, the greater the impact on the telomeres. So I know that some of you are interested, and that might tie in with some other evidence that you have that you're using in your clinical practice at the moment. So in order to get these benefits, what kind of things should we practice? Now, as I mentioned before, it's worth knowing what it is that your client is presenting with. So this particular big meta-analysis was looking at anxiety. So I've chosen this because this is such a common thing that we see, isn't it? So the important things are non-critical awareness of what arises from moment to moment. So this is noticing, now I'm anxious, now I'm happy, now I'm sad, now I'm this, now I'm that, now that I'm the other. Also noticing what's going on in our environment and noticing within my body, oh, I've got tension in my shoulders, I can release that. Now I've got a sensation in my stomach. And again, if I just allow that to be and respond to it calmly, it will fade away. And now there'll be something pleasant that I can sense, and now something unpleasant. So what this helps us to do is to flow more through life and we are less reactive to what happens. So this non-critical awareness is very helpful for emotional regulation. Looking deeply is a really important part of mindfulness. And then on a very practical way, relaxing muscles, paying full attention to different parts of the body. So those two things are often combined in a type of meditation called a body scan. And I've got if you Google my YouTube channel, I've got a whole playlist of those. So it's just Katie Sheen, mindfulness teacher and speaker on YouTube. There's a selection there, and there are loads of great apps. Personally, I use the Plum Village app. They've got some really beautiful deep relaxations. And if you're wondering, with a client that has never done any meditation before, where should we start? As long as there's no trauma whereby going to their body would make them feel uncomfortable, then I would start with the body scans, because the effect of relaxing, so the body scan or a deep relaxation, so they're often combined. The deep relaxations I would start with rather than the body scans, just to be really clear there. But a deep relaxation normally is a kind of body scan. But go for the deep relaxations, because just relaxing the tension out of your body can really transform things for people. And in mindfulness, rather than trying to think our way out of a state of mind, we would advise going to the body, releasing the emotion from the body, and then the mind follows. So it's coming out of the thinking into the body. Diaphragmatic breathing, which I'll explain in detail as we go through, but that's basically becoming aware of the diaphragm below your lungs. It helps people to stop breathing up high, which they tend to do when they're anxious, and to breathe lower down, to get that, if you go back to the image of the mountain, to feel more like a mountain, more solid in the present moment. So now I wanted to pick up some of the definitions of mindfulness, because having looked at some of the evidence base, hopefully these definitions will help to make sense for you of how you can incorporate this into your clinical practice as well as into your own practice. So mindfulness, this definition comes from this, another really good review that you might find useful. a form of mental stability. So it's about preventing attention from just being captured by everything that's going on. So it helps us to feel less pulled around by life, because those distractors inevitably arise. So it's more about noticing, oh, now I'm distracted here, so I'm just going to calmly come back. And now I'm distracted here. Do I need to look at this deeply? Not really. I'll come back to here. It's this sense of stability. Really important is this ability to recognize that thoughts are just thoughts, although they're very powerful. So it's definitely not about suppressing them, but observing them as, oh, here is a thought. And if I just kind of sit here and watch it, it will change. And your thoughts change so quickly. So it helps us get less caught in them when we get used to just letting them flow. This non-aversive stance towards experience with this curious, friendly or open quality of attention. In other words, oh, now I'm feeling really upset. And instead of me immediately saying, oh, I don't want to feel upset, I don't want to look at all this, I just want to push it away, distract myself, think about something else. Mindfulness helps me to go, wow, I'm really feeling upset at the moment. What is going on for me here? What do I need to look at now? How can I help myself? What's caused this? What in my present experience could I do differently to move this away? So rather than moving away from it, it helps me to engage with it in a way that so that I can deal with it properly. But it's this curiosity, oh, this is interesting. How am I feeling now? Not pushing stuff away. And attending moment by moment in this non-judgmental. So if I am feeling fearful, it's not following it up with, shouldn't be feeling fearful. You need to pull yourself together. It's this non-judgmental of like, this is what is here for me now. I'm feeling angry, so I need to look at my anger and deal with that. Not, as a lot of us were taught, is that we shouldn't show our anger. Anger is a bad thing. Anger can be very useful, but what mindfulness helps us to do is to not act or react out of anger, but to think, wow, this is strong anger. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to let this calm down, and then I'm going to look deeply at why my anger is here. When I look more deeply at it, maybe there's something that I can do differently in order to help solve the anger, because anger can also be something, you know, when we see injustices in the world, anger can be important, that it pushes us to do something about it. But if we act from a place of anger, we just get aggression back. So anger might be the initial thing, but we need to take care of our anger in order to act from a peaceful, calm place, in order to make positive change in the world. Now, the Sanskrit word for mindfulness means remembering. So it's about remembering to come back to the present moment with appropriate attention. It's inclusive and loving. So the practice, mindfulness practice, is to find ways to sustain appropriate attention throughout the day. So notice that none of us will ever achieve a perfect state of mindfulness. This is part of being kind to ourselves. Whenever you meditate, your mind will wander. During the day, you will keep getting caught up in your thinking. But mindfulness is noticing that that's happening and then calmly saying, oh, I've remembered to come back to the present moment. I've noticed that I'm caught and I'm going to come back again. So mindfulness is a very flowing practice. So we flow into mindfulness and out and back in, back out and back in. So there's this gentleness to it. And this is probably one of the most famous quotes that you may have heard. This is from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who founded MBSR. Mindfulness is about paying attention in this particular way. So on purpose, we have some control about where we place our attention. We're present, we're not caught in the past or the future, non-judgmentally to the unfolding experience moment by moment. But I really want to highlight that mindfulness is not just meditation. It's about this appropriate attention throughout the day to the unfolding of experience moment by moment, every moment. So mindfulness is not something where we do a meditation and then we just get up and forget about it. When we're meditating, we are developing our awareness and our skills so that then we can take that into life. So if I sit down and I say use the image of a mountain, and then I just get up and forget about it for the rest of the day, I will only have had the benefit for that short time where I'm thinking about it. But if later in the day I think, do you know what, I'm feeling really quite wobbly and a bit anxious, and I think, oh, that mountain image, I can think about that, and I just take a moment to relax and breathe just wherever I am, standing in the kitchen or in a queue somewhere, And I can come back and use that image, and then I can really settle down and then continue on with the day. And this awareness of my thoughts and so on, it's about using it every minute of every day. Mindfulness is a way of being in the world. It's much more than just the meditation, but the meditation helps us to develop the skills in order to live more mindfully. So you can think of mindfulness practice as a kind of cycle: curiosity about what's actually going on, awareness, accepting what we become aware of, then we gain the clarity that gives us the insight, that gives us the choice, and then we can start to transform the way that we think and act. So 2 key aspects of mindfulness is about stopping, calming, resting and healing, samatha I would call it. So it's this gathering in, and then looking deeply. So I like this quote about shining the light of mindfulness so that you gain understanding, and it's all about transforming suffering, initially of ourselves. When we can do that, then we help to heal other people in the world as well. So say that we're using mindfulness to break a habit. Initially, we recognize that our habit energy is stronger than our mindfulness. We can't give up overnight. So we set it up in a calm way. And with your clients, this one uses the example of smoking, but this could be any kind of habit that your clients present with that they say that they want to change. So first of all, you know that you're smoking when you're doing it, just like, oh, now I'm doing it. So if it's overeating, oh, I'm overeating right now. Okay, so this is what I'm doing. We're recognizing it. Then you begin to look more deeply to think, well, I wonder why I'm overeating. Like, what's really going on for me here? What's going on in my body? What's going on in our mind? What effects that this has on our body, on our mind, and on the people around us, so that we start to broaden it out. And notice this is still about just looking deeply. We're not changing anything yet. But eventually, by looking in this way, our mind and body will start to work with us to say, you know what, now that I can see this more clearly, I think we might do things a bit differently. Sangha is important. So these are the people around us. Who are we spending time with? So we might notice, okay, well, I tend to smoke when I'm in this kind of situation. So therefore, we might choose to spend less time in that kind of situation so that we can gain the support of people around us. And we also have a very broad view of sense of breaking cycles of habitual behaviour across generations. We tend to have habits because of everything that has gone before, including our upbringing, everything that has happened to us. And so if I can break a habit, that means that I then stop passing it on to the people around me, whether they're friends or family. So you also get a sense of you're not alone in this, you're part of something much bigger, which can help clients and ourselves to really link in really well to support networks. So when your client is in front of you, first of all, assess how they are, because the first thing is usually about using mindfulness to help them to slow down, to pause, to calm, to rest, to release stress and tension. But this isn't always the case. So I want to introduce you to the idea of the window of tolerance. And through the link here, and this will be in the references that we send you, there's a free downloadable image, which I'm about to show you so that you can actually use this to discuss with your clients. So with apologies for the fact that it's not 100% clear by the time I get it big enough to put on screen, when you print it out, it's clearer than this. And there is your original reference at the top. So the window of tolerance is this central zone where we feel calm, cool, collected, connected. And if something happens to us, we can just soothe ourselves. So we've got an ability to regulate our emotional state when we're within our window of tolerance. Helping people to think, have I moved out and kind of up out of my window of tolerance? Am I hyper aroused? So I've got all of these kind of symptoms. There might be some of the addictions or impulsivity kicking, it might be more emotional. Or have I dropped down into a freeze response? This is all to do with the stress response, isn't it? It's either fight or flight or freeze, which is part of the same thing. But we would, in a freeze, you're hyper aroused. And so this is where you might be feeling very emotionally flat, disconnected, disassociation. Notice that memory loss comes in here as well. So with clients who've experienced extreme stress, they start to talk about this memory loss, and that's part of the freeze response. So it's worth then looking at why have I moved out of my window of tolerance? Fear of what? Am I having thoughts? Do I have a bodily sensation which is kicking off a fear response? Do I feel out of control? Are there trauma related beliefs that are being triggered? So do I feel as though life in the present is echoing something in the past? Well, then what we talk to the clients about is about how to stay in the window of tolerance. So it might be about, if you're caught in thoughts about the past, coming into the present moment, so that you realize, you suddenly get that awareness of, oh, hang on a minute, that isn't happening right now. And then suddenly that brings you back into the window of tolerance. It could be grounding exercises, similar to the one about the mountain that I shared with you, or the rock in the middle of the stream. It could be something as simple as feeling your feet on the floor, feeling the connection between your bottom and the chair, really feeling held by where you are in the present moment. But I mean, I know there are some really wonderful experienced practitioners on the webinar today, and I'm sure you also know lots of other techniques for self-soothing and calming the body. But sometimes just showing people this window of tolerance is enough to give them a visual that when they're feeling an emotion, they can literally look at the piece of paper and go, oh, I'm here. Therefore, if I do X, Y, Z, I can get back into my window of tolerance. But this isn't just about staying in your window of tolerance. It's then about expanding it, because if we've experienced trauma, our window of tolerance might be really, really narrow. So we do a lot of grounding exercises to make people feel more secure, so that we begin to broaden that window of tolerance, so that we feel more emotionally regulated for more of the time. So as I described above about this focused attention or open monitoring, when you show people the window of tolerance, it might help them to go back to what we talked about before, to say, am I too focused on this? Do I need to broaden out so that then I feel calmer? So that might be one of the things that they use in order to open their awareness and bring themselves back into their window of tolerance. However, if what they're feeling is overwhelmed by the whole of life, maybe what we want to encourage them to do is to use some kind of focused attention. If you're feeling overwhelmed by everything, come back in. Can you feel one hand against another? Can you touch your clothes? Can you focus in on something that makes you feel safe and secure? So you can also use the open monitoring in that way. Finding a safe anchor in the present moment is going to be really crucial to help people feel more safe and secure. So you notice how often your mind wanders off, and you find an anchor in the present moment that helps you become calmer. You always bring your mind back lightly and kindly, because we're developing kindness, but it's things that you can see, hear, smell or taste, touch, and it can be your breathing as well. And in mindfulness, we also recognize that our senses are our thoughts. So you can simply think a positive thought, and that can become your anchor, maybe an image of a safe place that you kind of imagine inside your body, for example. Now, we can use mindful eating as a way to really help people to engage all their senses and to bring them out of their thoughts and into the present moment. But obviously, you will need to take a judgment around that as to whether or not your client is presenting with eating disorders, in which case I definitely wouldn't start with this. I would start with relationship with the body and come to relationship with food much further on down the line. One thing that you would be able to use in your clinic, because this works with pretty much anyone, if you've got a client in front of you who's very anxious, you can use this mindful practice. It's used in the Christie Hospital. So you use all of your senses to notice a cup in your hands and the drink inside it. So you're looking at it, there's light reflected in your drink, there's maybe a smell that comes from it, the cup feels a certain way. Then you open your senses to notice what else is around you, the room, the air around you, what else you can see, and especially things that you find comforting. So that's moving from the focus to the open monitoring. Then you come back to the drink. Each time your mind starts to wander off into troublesome thoughts or making judgments, you come back to the physical sensations of the drink. And then you can take a sip. This stimulates the vagus nerve. And it's calming and comforting. It gets you out of your thoughts and into sensations. Then you can bring in gratitude, the fact that I have clean water in my cup, the fact that the glass is a nice one, all of those kind of things, that I have got hands that are able to hold a cup. and helping people to appreciate whatever kind of health that they are experiencing in the moment, but all of the people and circumstances that made the drink possible. So you're taking them out of this anxiety, which tends to be very, very individualized. You're only aware of you, to think, yeah, but there are all these people around you involved in getting a clean drink to where you are. So you're supported by all these people and places that you can't see. Can help people to feel less alone and come out of their own thoughts into a broader awareness. If people are happy to come to their breath, you would definitely focus more on the out breath if you've got somebody very anxious in your clinic, because the out breath is the one that really stimulates the vagus nerve and therefore activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it would be more about focusing rather than breathing in, which if you breathe in, you can feel that kind of lifts you up and is quite stimulating. If you breathe out, it settles you down. So the evidence for mindful breathing is very powerful, but people need to be taught it in such a way so that they're not trying to control their breath. With mindfulness, we're just observing the breath and letting it settle down in its own time. Diaphragmatic breathing, I promised I'd give you a little bit more information about. So because the anxious breathing is high in the chest, we take the intention into the center of the body. So if while you're sitting there, you just become aware of the rise and fall of your lungs, so you can feel your rib cage moving, and then become aware that below your lungs, there's the diaphragm, which is this beautiful big muscle stretched front to back and side to side. And as you breathe, the diaphragm moves down as you breathe in and your lungs fill with air, moves up as you breathe out. So there's this gentle motion, and pointing out that that's what's massaging your internal organs, so helping to release tension. So if you release the tension about your rib cage, your diaphragm can move more freely. And you might notice that that's what's pushing your belly in and out as you breathe. And if you help your client to place the hand on the belly to feel the diaphragm moving, then it helps to settle them down into their body. And then you might become aware that you're holding tension in your hips, your pelvis, your upper legs. Helps you to relax there and settle down more into a sense of being more grounded on the chair where you are. A good example of this is a 3 minutes breathing space. Again, there's a recording of this on my YouTube channel if you want to have a look, but they're all over the internet as well, 3 minutes breathing spaces. It's just about being aware of where you are, notice how you're feeling, then gathering awareness around the breath, being aware of the diaphragm rising and falling, a calm, stable feeling in the center of your body. And then once you feel gathered around your breath, you expand your awareness back out to the whole of the present moment, but you maintain that feeling of being gathered and of moving through life in a way that feels gathered and stable and strong. So a 3 minutes breathing space is a good thing to introduce to clients to use as often as they remember during the day. You can also introduce mindful movement, particularly with clients that find coming to their breath difficult. It's more about the movement of the breath in the body, so getting them to notice the belly moving or the slight rise and fall in your shoulders, your whole body moving each time. But one way to do it is simply to open and close your fingers on each in-breath and out-breath. So opening and closing, and you can use the image of a flower opening and blooming and then resting back if you like as well. Just helps people to tune into the rhythm of their breathing and get used to the fact that by taking their attention to their breathing, it gradually calms. But with somebody with a history of panic attacks, you'd come towards the breath and then move away into attention in another part of the body and then back and away. That book that I've used there as a reference is very useful about managing trauma if you want to learn more about that. Mindful movement then is more about expanding that initial movement of opening and closing your hands into larger movements, maybe raising and lowering your hands. But it's about bringing awareness to how you move rather than exercising. And this helps people to become more aware of how they move in everyday life. Just simple things. How do you get up out of a chair? How do you move around the house? Are you holding tension? Are you crooked? So that you help to release the pain and the tension and the holding in the body. exploring the hard and soft edges of physical experience. Are you the type of person that pushes on through? So your body is saying, I really, really need to rest. And you're like, no, we've got more to do. We're not going to do that. Which obviously you'll know if, when you work with clients, if we continue to push ourselves, eventually our body just takes us out and just says, no, that's enough. You're ill now, properly ill. So mindfulness helps us to really connect into what's happening in the body and to be kinder about taking care of ourselves. It's also really, really effective at raising self-esteem. Particularly if you use the body scans that are about kindness and awareness. There are some really good ones on the Plum Village app that I would recommend. You can also enjoy mindful walking. We walk all day long, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time. Just 7 mindful steps are enough to make a difference, coming out of your thoughts, noticing the way that your body moves as you walk, coordinating your steps with your breathing. This is the bit that I find really useful. Walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. You cannot do that if you're holding tension in your body. So I find remembering, just being aware, am I walking as though my feet are kissing the earth? If not, I need to breathe, kind of release the tension, come into the moment and relax my body. And that immediately then helps my mind to relax. Because my mind is relaxed, then I can see things more clearly. So coming into the body can be a really effective way of releasing emotional tension. You can use different words with each step. You remember earlier we talked about labeling as a way of helping us hold attention. So you can use with one step, arrived, home, meaning in the present moment. I'm here now. Life is happening now. This is really useful for helping to stop worrying about the past or the future. Or if you know that you're feeling anxious, you can choose some words that help you to feel more in your body and less anxious. So maybe safe, solid, free of anxiety, free of anger, free of suffering, whatever it happens to be. So you can choose your own words, your own labels, one with each foot as you walk and one with each breath as you're breathing. Again, alternating between focused attention on body and then what's going on around you, playing with those. But mainly, don't forget to pause and enjoy the experience, because mindfulness practice should feel fun and joyful. If you're striving too hard, then you've got the wrong kind of awareness in that. It should always feel gentle and soft. Even if you're coming across something that's difficult, you can feel yourself tightening around, oh, this is difficult. And then the practice is to soften. It is difficult, so I'm just going to look at it in a soft, kind, calm way. So remembering always the softening element of mindfulness. This is an acronym that you can download as well from the Greater Good Science Centre. They've got all sorts of interesting stuff on their website, in their emails and so on. So this is something that you might find it easy to remember, is that if what we want to do is build our resilience and water the seeds of happiness within us, then we just become aware of something that we appreciate, that we value, or we find amazing. We just wait for at least one full inhalation, and then as we breathe out, we really think, this is a happy moment. This makes me feel safe. Now I feel secure, because it activates the vagus nerve, stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. You're breathing out, so you've got the diaphragm moving, stimulates the brain to release dopamine. So you get this hit so that your brain remembers, this is a feeling of safety. This is a feeling of happiness. This is a good moment. And that helps to counter our negativity bias, because our brain tends to focus on all the things that are wrong in our lives. We get very hooked up on that. That's to do with the fact that that's important to keep us safe. So we need to counter that by noticing the things that are positive. And this awe practice is something that some people find easy to remember. And according to some of the research, particularly the stuff that Rick Hansen has done, it can take about 15 seconds for something positive to actually register in your brain. So this awe practice you do for, a number of out-breaths, so that your brain really has a chance to remember it. Now, coming back to this mindfulness awareness of the body, once we've got people feeling a bit more safe and secure using some of these grounding type of exercises that I've talked about, we would then help people to become more aware of the connection between body and mind. So you think about these 4 stages of response. You get this surge of adrenaline if we're talking about anxiety, and we immediately label it pleasant, unpleasant, or indifferent. So the mindfulness practice there is to not label it with that element of judgment. I don't want this, or I do want this, this is whatever, and trying to push it away. So we just go, oh, this is interesting. I've got this weird surgy feeling in my body right now. This gives rise to a feeling or sensation which is potentially short-lived. In other words, a real flash of anxiety, and we become aware, wow, that's a real flash of anger or anxiety or joy or whatever emotion it is that we're feeling. Then what can happen is our mind can adopt this feeling, and now we are starting to feed that flash of emotion. Because if I feel a surge of anxiety and my mind goes, oh my goodness, that's anxiety, what's going on, and starts to really feed it, now I become anxious. Whereas if I'm more mindful, then I can interrupt that pattern and think, oh, this is a flash of anxiety, now I'm having anxious thoughts. And if I just wait calmly, respond calmly, look deeply, then I can allow them to settle. As opposed to if I really hold on and start feeding that mood state, now I am anxious. Now I look at the world through anxious eyes. My behavior is all stemming from fear, and it really affects how we interpret the world around us. So mindfulness helps us to be aware of those 4 stages and to breathe, and particularly those first 3 stages, to greet them more calmly so that we avoid being caught by a particular emotion, which then we can't get rid of. So it allows life to flow. We do a lot of work around helping people to notice the ebb and flow of their breath, the ebb and flow of sounds, the ebb and flow of emotions. And that's all part of recognizing that everything is impermanent, everything will pass, and therefore to respond to everything that we come across in life in a calmer, more measured, steadier way. So watering the seeds of emotions is expanding this idea of helping people to notice when we've got a flash of an emotion, and when we're then watering it, make it stronger. So if you notice and name the emotions that you can sense, just accept that they're there. Be kind to yourself around that, because mindful awareness is about taking care of all emotions, not negating them. But notice then, what are your thoughts doing? Are you watering the seeds of different emotions? In other words, if you get a flash of anxiety, does your brain just go off down a train of thoughts that is making the anxiety worse? Can you get off the train at the next station and catch another train which brings you back to yourself and maybe takes you off down onto on a calmer line of thought, a calmer track of thought? So you can use the image of trains sometimes to help yourself get off at the next station, or you can use this kind of image of which seeds am I watering? What am I doing during the day today to nourish myself in order to help myself feel safer and stronger? And there are some really lovely meditations, which some of the words might be something along the lines of, may I learn to nourish the seeds of joy in my life every day. And you would just breathe with that for a minute or two. And what starts to happen is when you use those kind of words in a meditation, they kind of start to, if you like, seep out into life. And I just find that during the day, I'm just a little bit more aware of being kinder to myself, having done that meditation. That wording comes from something. It's called all sorts of different things. It's a loving kindness meditation. There are lots of people that do them. The one that I used this morning that had those words in it was, again, off the Plum Village app. And it's called Love Meditation by Sister True Dedication. You can find it in the Plum Village Essentials part of that. But so there are so many different types of meditation, and it's a case of finding the words that really resonate with you. And you might want to use the same meditation for, I would suggest, at least a week, to really start to become familiar with it and to let it kind of seep into your body and affect how you are during the day before you then move on to another one. And that little reference that's just come up for you there, that is a great book if you suffer from anxiety. It's a really, really easy read, full of practical ideas. So another thing that helps us and our clients to see the power of our thoughts is this little story about how our mind creates our world, because I think probably we can all remember being at school and you're given one line to say in next week's assembly. So some children will think this is the best thing that's ever happened to them and they'll be so excited. Others, not really bothered either way, too busy thinking about something else, won't really affect them very much. Others will think this is the worst thing that they could ever have been invited to do. So the children within that class, the same thing has happened to all of them, but the way that they react to what has happened totally changes their experience of life during that week. So it's our perceptions of life and it's our reactions that define our life experience. Whereas mainly what we feel as human beings is, this happens to me in life and this defines my life. So mindfulness is very, very empowering in terms of realizing, well, yeah, I am always going to be that kind of person that when I'm given a line to say, I'm going to get that flash of nerves. But mindfulness gives me the tools to breathe with that, to sit with that, to be kind to myself, to find strategies around that, that therefore I can say that one line in assembly or whatever it is for you that is your trigger. So last couple of things here for you, just on these last couple of slides. What I'm talking about there is often used, the wording that's often used, well, in Breathworks, and they offer courses on stress reduction and mindfulness for health and pain management, as Barbara mentioned earlier, the ones that I specialise in. This difference between primary and secondary suffering, traditionally the way that the Buddha taught it, because mindfulness comes from Buddhist teachings, he used a story about the first and the second arrow. So something unpleasant happens to us. We can't do anything about that. That's the primary suffering, the first arrow. But if our mind creates stories around that unpleasant experience, boy, we can make it worse. That's like firing a second arrow into the same wound. So what we want to avoid doing is firing that second arrow so that then we can take out the first arrow and help to heal ourselves. So we do a lot of work in mindfulness about helping people to see what is the difference between my actual experience, what's actually happened here, and what is my response to it, because particularly our habitual ways of thinking are so subtle. They're such a part of who we are that we can't see them clearly, and mindfulness helps us to gradually over time see things more and more clearly. So to leave you with this is a genuine little postcard that I have. Is it true? Are you sure? And that little postcard, if you leave that lying around your house and suggest that your clients use it, is one of the first steps into being mindfully aware of what is going on for us. So when your thoughts are convincing you that life is a certain way, just that little question, are you sure? Opens us up to the possibility that there's another way of responding. And often we can see that when we talk to somebody else, isn't it? So there's a whole area of mindfulness around mindful communication, which is about really listening deeply to what we're thinking. And particularly if this is in conflict with somebody else, and then going back to them and saying, this is what I heard, and this is what it means to me, which is now why I now feel angry or upset. Is this what you meant? And so often people go, oh my goodness, no, that wasn't what I meant at all. This is how I perceive the world. This is how I think about these things. This helps us to understand each other more deeply so that we can move forward peacefully together. So very powerful little phrase there. So the hour is up. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you've enjoyed it, and there've been some ideas there that you can use for yourself and hopefully in your clinical practice. Do feel free to type any thoughts, questions, any